Hello, this is the Blender Discord render roast, and this is for any in renders that you perchance want to be roasted or critiqued or analysed in any way for any kind of improvements or some sort of interesting aspect about them that you want to be talked about on this particular video stream, then feel free to join the Discord. There's a link in the description for the Discord. The entire idea of this is that you send in a render, and every week or so there's a person who comes on stream and talks about them, roasts them if you will. So, right, HP 2009. This is a very nice looking render. That pipe looks like it's been fattened on the curve. It looks to me like you've tried to make a straight corner like this and then just beveled that area on a tube, and that's not incredibly optimal because you end up getting a weird increase in size in the middle. There is an add-on called the pipe tools, which I think will solve that issue for you right away, and I think you can just use that to drag and drop in any kind of L joints or cross joints on a pipe of any kind. Yeah, I think it's a similar issue here as well. But going by the other stuff, the so I think the character of the person in this is very, very good. Very accurate, very well lit. Very nice. It looks great from afar. I think the composition is really nice. You got really nice cold blues and a warm red. It draws your eye towards the person that's very brightly lit by it. I would say it's a little bit odd that these have basically no features on them. They seem to just be the most 3D thing here. 3D in terms of easily spotted as a 3D object. Because the rest of it looks pretty great. I can sort of see a bit of a noise on here, but I think it's possibly just due to the texture. Well, there's a tiny bit of noise in the sky, I think, but it might just be the fog. Yeah, this sign is incredibly perfect and not beveled at all. I think if you just put some bevel on the hard edges of these surfaces, then you'd get a long way of just making it look a bit better. Yeah, there's the pipe thing on there. I think it's just if you wanted to keep this consistent instead of having it bloated in the middle. I don't think that was intentional. I'm just trying to make sure that any intentional stuff is not taken as bad in any way. But I think these sort of rendering artifacts, I think these are probably aspects of noise. But I think it's just something you sort of learn in time to handle and deal with. There's a really good addition of birds as well. I like the cables in the distance. They look meaningfully chaotic and nice and interesting. It's a cool, like, bridge with telephone wires going across it. I don't know where this bridge would be, but I think it's nice and gets across the feeling of, say, loneliness and isolation on this guy. I think it looks really good. Yeah, pretty good job, HP 2009. Not a lot else to say about it. I think the sky texture looks good. I think the lighting is great. I think the materials are pretty solid. Yeah, just have a look at those pipes and the detail on these poles. Sorry about the background noise. I am trying to make it as low as possible, but thank you. Right, moving on. Right. I will not try and pronounce that, but this is the person that has created this. And looks extremely nice. Very good understanding of rendering aspects to try and get this looking as 2D as possible, because at first glance this doesn't look 3D. I think it's only minorly given away in some of the like poses and the tiny like rendering imperfections. So, for instance, any artists wouldn't make like tiny flecks of white here. I don't think that works in the character silhouette. Or like from a distance, it sort of looks like noise. It's sort of distracting. But the proportions and the character and the angles look really well made. The colour choices as well, really good. I love the shine in the hair and the backlighting on the side. Posing these fingers as well, really good. I'd say the posing in general is really nice, because it gets across the kind of flowy, stilted stiffness of these sort of Egyptian markings and characters. I would say this sort of arm feels a bit off. I don't know if these palms would be posed so flatly to the chest like that, but it looks really nice. I feel like that might be an error that might need to be continued across that line, but otherwise I think this looks really, really good. Not sure if it was a choice to have this side not have the outline on, but I think it kind of works in this situation. Yeah, I think you could just brush this up a little bit in some sort of after program to get rid of these tiny imperfections, but otherwise I think it looks really, really good. Like the character models themselves and the poses are brilliant, and the faces. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, just some sort of minor stuff like this. I don't know if that's correct shading on a fingertip just on there. I don't know if this would happen on there. But I think all of this looks fairly intentional, and a really, really cool idea. I love the shadows as well. They look perfectly imperfect as well. Really, really good job. I sort of appreciate the idea of rendering this at a fairly low resolution, because the rough blockiness of this makes it look really like a game of some kind, or it just brings across the flatness more, but not sacrificing the silhouette and the shape. Like these corners of the leg, really nice. I really like this bit. Really good exaggeration of proportions. Yeah, I think this is just really good. Keep up the good work, whatever your name is. Sorry. Alright, let's move on. Alright, Juan Jesus. Or Juan Jesus. It's a very nice car render. Cannot see a lot wrong with it. Really nice lighting, really good materials. tiny fleck of blue there. Not sure if it's too bright or if it's just some sort of ambient bounces that are just going crazy. Yeah, it sort of appears here as well, so I think it might be on purpose. Yeah, really nice. Lighting as well, the gradient from magenta to teal, really nice. The reflections on the floor as well, sort of like tiled floor going into blackness. It's very nice. It's supposed to take it a while to render. Nice. Yeah, basically can't see anything wrong with it. I think there's possibly antenna there, don't know. I can't speak to the accuracy of the car. I'm relying on you to do that, because it seems like the modelling has gone basically perfectly. It looks excellent. can't really see a complaint about this. In terms of advice, I would say that you probably know more than I do about this sort of render and modelling. But for me, I would say it's, depending on the goal of this, I think it doesn't sell the car as much. If this was supposed to be a sort of car showroom model, then it's possibly... No, that's pretty good as well. I don't know, maybe try and have a go at putting some tiny amounts of sag on the wheels. Basically all car renders in adverts are, or car footage in adverts are all renders anyway, so it's basically sort of as good as it can be. I'm not sure what to say. I don't know what's going on here. That seems to be possibly a mistake. The reflection of the wing mirror. Or this tiny smudge. Unless that's the rear view mirror on the inside. If you modelled that, then even more kudos. But yeah, incredibly well made. I think it's even your profile picture. Well, very good job. And I shall move on. Right, Flying Eagle. Okay. So, one thing I would say about glass renders is there's a really good talk by the 2019 Blender conference. Someone goes through a very comprehensive and detailed explanation of how to render glass, and it helps you get rid of these black reflected areas. Because that is a property of when you're trying to render glass in a rendering engine. If you don't have the light bouncer set properly, then the light will just forever bounce inside a piece of glass and then just get stuck, and it will return as a black colour. So inside of glass it will just continuously render black. And there's some settings you can do to avoid that. So I would encourage you to have a look. There's possibly needs some bevel on these bits. But the cookies look pretty good. I think they're very soft, or softly lit. I don't think they quite match the chocolate chips. I think the plates are fairly interesting shape. I don't know if they're like bespoke coffee, cafe, cookie eating plates or saucers. Ooh, that stool looks like it's very hard edge. I want to soften that up a little bit. But yeah, I think the lighting is a little bit flat. I think you could bring up the lights from the back a bit more, or from here, just to help get across the position these plates have on the table, because right now they feel like they sort of rest in place, like float in place, because the table is basically completely uniform, and the shadows all like diffuse around it, because I can sort of see a ambient like occlusion sort of shadow, but there's nothing to say that there's any light coming from above. It sort of makes it look like it's just floating there, when the light sort of here suggests that there should be a casting shadow backwards. Especially on these things. But yeah, the mug looks really good. I think the coffee texture on the inside looks really good as well. Really soft and really... yeah, look quite foamy. I think the spoon possibly needs to be made a little bit softer on the edges, because it seems to be that this is also very hard edged. I think you should just have a little bit of a play with the bevel. But yeah, I think it's possibly a matter of scale. If you I think taking the cookies into perspective, it seems like that cup is gigantic, as well as the spoon. It sort of seems like the spoon is bigger than the plates, especially compared to the stool. I think you should just have a look at some references just to get some perspective on the size. But otherwise, I think you did a pretty good job. Yeah, it's definitely hard to get this sort of render looking perfect, especially hard for like glass and liquid and porcelain. Alright, nice work, the Flying Eagle. Very good. Alright, and now we're on to Abysma. Alright. It's an interesting robot model. Yeah, there's like there is some tiny bevel here, and I think that helps a lot. Possibly say that this edge is supposed to be more straight, although it seems like the rest of the model is trying to look a bit more rugged. Okay, so if you've got a sort of overall texture like that, then I think you want to either make it really subtle so that you don't see the colour change difference, or try and make it so that the rust appears more in the crevices, because that's what it will appear. I think this is possibly a generated texture as well, so have a look at using, say, the AO node and setting some influence to have it so it only appears in the sort of crevices or the pointiness setting on the texture coordinate. Oh no, it's mesh or geometry info. Yeah, I think I can see some corners here where there's probably like a slice of a sphere, and then you take off the other segments. But yeah, I think this was supposed to, I think you could try and subdivide it first to get this curve smoothed, and then try beveling, and then setting bevel to only work on the angle. So if there's a higher angle, it does beveling more, because I think the bevel is maybe what tried to make this corner off a bit more. Unless this is like going for a game asset, in which case I think it's basically fine. But yeah, it's just a minor issue. Yeah, I think the texture device applies everywhere, so if you want more rust or smudges or smudge work, make sure to like try and keep it confined to corners more, because if it's uniform across the entire thing, it looks a bit more slapped on. But yeah, I think it's a really cool design. I think you done a good job with modelling. I would say possibly have a look at proportions and scaling, because the design is good, but the scale of stuff and compared to other parts of the model looks really jarring. So like this is pretty huge, and this is also basically like double the size. I would say have a look at like detail distribution, because you usually want to go big, medium, and then small in terms of just shapes and proportions and objects. It's a sort of an art study topic. You can find more information from there's a good channel, I think it's called Ethan Becker. He does some really good like drawing videos, and there's one really good one about detail proportions and size, because you want to have an even distribution of forms and shapes that are like not completely different in scale, because it sort of makes it a bit jarring and top heavy. But that's more of a conceptual thing. I think it's a lot harder to pin down that as advice, but I think your modelling skills in regards to wanting to make this thing is really good. I quite like this framework. It's just sort of a large amount of detail hidden in the back, and I don't know if that's... It sort of draws the eye sort of awkwardly, especially when you don't show it all. I don't know if it's trying to hide something, but this is just the general impression I first get when I look at this. I do appreciate the effort gone into putting the holes and divots and crevices and the ridges in here, as well as the inset stuff in here. I think it makes a good design. Or a good a good amount of detail, but I think you need to just work on how that detail is distributed. But yeah, I think the render's great. Lighting is pretty good. It gets across your model. Yeah. Yeah, that'd just be my own advice, Abysma, to just have a look at the like detail distribution and like character design. There's a really, really good video called like character design tips. It's got like a picture of a purple dog on the front on YouTube. It's a really good video, and it goes over some of this stuff. All right, Drachenseal, and this I believe has got multiple stages of the render, and I think that's really good. It's always, if you're going to put a lot of effort into a single render, then it's really good to block it out, and I think they did this a lot. Yeah, it's a really like nice sculpted background. Does he say on anything? Oh, it's hidden. Okay. I would say the environment and the rendering of that is more or less amazing. I don't think there's a lot I could say about it. I think this soldier's pose sort of reads a bit weirdly for me. I feel like this arm would be a lot more down in here if he was leaning it casually. Even this sort of elbow plate sort of makes me think it should be pointing his arm like down here as opposed to out here. Otherwise the like armor plate would be pointing this way a bit more. But that's sort of fairly minor. Like the foliage and the low camera angle, the depth of field works really great for this. And it's sort of a Dark Souls inspired piece. Yeah, I do think that arm is possibly needs to be tilted down a bit. I don't know if you have a reference shot of this, but it's just immediately when I see this, that's what springs to mind. It's more or less the role of art to fake stuff that you think needs to look right, or it's like making fake look good. And it's fairly hard to say that. Yeah, so if I look at a real created if I just look at a real picture, then it's gonna lay out perfectly and I'll believe it because it's just a real life picture. But when you're trying to compose something from complete imagination or from reference or like create something new or inspired by something, then it's going to have a lot of decisions that you're going to make where it won't make sense, or it's going to it's going to end up looking worse the more realistic you make it, up until the point when you just end up recreating like the entire world from scratch just to make one render. But in terms of like faking a render to look nice, it's all about person's perspective and setting everything up. Like the composition of this is great. I think it really perfectly draws the eye looking for this tiny window. But just the silhouette of this character, sort of this hand, looks really awkward. If you look at the 2019 Blender conference video on hands and posing in hands, that's also an excellent video. One of the things that went over quite commonly is if you have a finger bent like this, and this angle equals this angle, that's almost never the case. It's almost always this angle is way more shallow than this angle. So you end up with a finger that looks like that, or like that, or even like that. And this would just always help it sell more, because right now this finger is just either straight or like just curving perfectly, when I think it sort of would help if the pose was. It also helps if they're like. It does sell it a bit more if they're in armor where they can't specifically bend in some cases. But there's a good drawing technique where you don't draw the hands, you try to draw the silhouette. So if you say drawing a hand, you want to draw a curve across all the fingertips. So like that for instance, or so if you imagine a hand here, it's hard to do on my mouse. You can picture the middle finger goes here, index here, and then pinkies and thumb. If you have a look at some possibly that hand video as well as some like artist rendition of hands, it really helps with posing like so much. It's just a few small aspects can really help it, and it's just stuff you do not notice or think about when you're just trying to make a render from scratch or from real life. Same thing here. Even if this soldier is perfectly upright and his armor sort of in the real world, if the armor was in this situation, then it would sit like this. Right now, to me, he doesn't look very hunched over or exasperated. He just sort of seems like rigid, like his back is just straight and his head's just sort of sticking out. Whereas shoulders and hips always need to counterbalance each other, and a back should probably hunch over a bit more. If you have a look at some posing and some figure drawing and life drawing, that really helps get that across. So if you end up looking at, say, posing or some just looking at some videos about drawing, then it really helps get that idea, because it's all about making it for what the viewer wants to see rather than what's real sometimes. And that's just my impression. I could be completely wrong. This could be entirely just something that I see but no one else does, but it's some stuff I think you could possibly have a look at that I don't think you've seen yet. But basically every other aspect is brilliant. Trees, foliage, fire looks amazing. Branches, sky in the background. Intrigue, story, the modelling of the background. Like this like brick sculpting looks incredible. I don't even know how you did that. Adding all this foliage in. Jesus, that must have taken a while to render. Oh, I couldn't even see that there was like vines on this edge. Okay, there is some. Yeah, I didn't even notice that. But yeah, amazing work. Keep it up. Ah, another one by the same person. Yes, so yeah, I think it's a perfect square image. I think the composition is good on here, just straight in the centre. I think you quite like your low angles, don't you? It's sort of odd that there's a tree line, tree tops in the background, where either this is on a hill or this is really low to the ground and there's some sort of hedges in the way. The sort of sky seems a bit blank, but the focus on the mushrooms looks good. I think there were some other renders in the ArtStation page, but they were like just showing the steps of rendering. I think your research into denoising went really, really well, because other than some like JPEG artifacts or like upload size scaling stuff with me and copying off the internet, it looks brilliant. I think the fog is very well made. I think the light coming out the bottom of the mushroom is a really nice idea. The mushrooms are textured and modelled really nicely. It's pretty great. But yeah, I don't think I have a lot to say about this. Yeah, I think I just work on that background because it doesn't look like it makes sense. I like the colour usage to have this bordered off against this and the ground. And it sort of makes like a rule of thirds sort of thing. But I will say that it doesn't make a lot of sense when I start to think about it. that this would be here. Because if it's a low angled shot, then I don't know why there'd be trees or bushes in the background quite so roughly. But I think you could place these in basically any scene and it would look great. But yeah, nice work. Again, Draken Seal. Another Abysma. Now this I think has done a lot more to keep proportions of the character. Because I can see like just lumping out the silhouette of this large chunk here against, say, this medium chunk here, and then there's a small part in the middle. Yeah, I'm not great with a mouse on drawing. But that's just these shapes on their own. When you block out a sculpt or a model, you could really see, just from the scale of the forms you want to make, it ends up looking a lot nicer. But yeah, I think you have the sort of material issue where it sort of isn't adhering to the shape of the material, it just sort of, you've plastered it on. Which I think is a pretty decent material, but it's just not selling that it's a real object just because it's been sort of plastered on. I think the modelling itself is really good. I really like the inside detail of all the curves and the inside bits. I think this, I don't know if this is rendered Eevee, but I think that's sort of a rendering issue. I think you just need to up the subdiv on it. Yeah, these don't seem to be connected, but I think that's just a design implementation. I don't think that's a problem. Really good, like, effort on the pistons on the inside, the ball as well. This on the inside, good lighting from the back. I like that you can see through it, because I don't have the alpha here, but I think you can see through that bit. But yeah, really good lead up to the head with the pistons. Sort of makes it feel more like a robot than just a static pile of like boxes. And the balls as well. I think the ball joints and the wrists possibly suffer from a bit of that, because I don't really believe that that's sort of a part of a robot, but it's obviously hard to like design all of this in your head or in a 3D world. I know that in the Transformers films, and at least in the first one, ILM made like every single cog internally in Optimus Prime, or every single like tiny component, and they ended up having to cull all of it basically when it wasn't on screen. But yeah, that's like crazy ultra ridiculous detail, which I don't think you need to worry about. I think the colour separation is good. I like the difference of like black metal and white plastic. Really decent job. I'd possibly throw in a bit of like alternate plastic material, because this sort of seems like a rigid metal component where it feels like it should flex a bit more. I don't know about that, but yeah, good lighting, good render. Can't think of a lot more to say about it. But yeah, good going, Abysma. I think you've done a lot better in this one than the other one. But I think they're both really good. Right. Now for Mr. Guacacado. It's a really interesting design. That seems like suffering from a subdivision or sharp edges or non-smoothed edges, edge creases pulling it down this way. And yeah, I think there's a bit of noise going on. I don't know if there's a sparkly metal. I don't know, actually. That might be textured a bit. But I really like the design. It looks really interesting. I think this is like quite thin. But yeah, in terms of issues, I don't see a lot. I think you've beveled it all nicely. Lighting's pretty decent. Yeah, possibly this this being attached to here. You could try and get a sharper edge on this bit, but so you don't have this awkward colour separation where it sort of curves into it. I don't know if these are wheels or sort of a weird like rotary joint, but it seems like it doesn't move. I don't know. I think it's sort of a crazy abstract design anyway, and I don't think that's the point of asking about if this could move or not. But yeah, this is suitably, I think, creepy, which I think is what the goal was. I think it's pretty good. Yeah, this seems a bit more thin than this one. I don't know why that came across like that, but yeah. Really good job, Mr. Corcado. Yeah, I can see some pinching here, I think. Maybe not. Yeah, I think you just... actually, this seems like might have had a mirror before the subsurf, where it's right at the top, possibly. Or maybe there were some turtle faces. But yeah, nice one. Ah, again, okay. Yeah, that same knight from before. Yeah, I think because they said this was a work in progress, so I'm not going to go too much on it. I think the composition is great, again. I would say possibly... Yeah, just while you're at it, have a look at those like posing and caricatures and some life drawing. Possibly don't draw if you don't want to, but have a look at just the way they sort of theorize poses and blockouts of characters, like in an image. Because right now this feels very static and very rigid, incredibly symmetrical as well. I think it would look more like character. Yeah, because even in real life you wouldn't have something so perfectly up straight as a sword like that. You might want to have it on a slight angle, or someone's going to try and lean their weight on it. Very rarely do people lean their weight on both their legs equally, especially if they're looking at us posing or waiting for something. Have a look at just how you would pose in real life and just try and mimic that. But usually you want to have a person's spine and general body just like curve in an S shape. Obviously that's a bit exaggerated, but you can sort of get the idea. Just have a look at those exercises, because everything else is basically fantastic. Foliage again, I don't know if you're using some sort of pack, but this seems like incredibly high detail grass and plant work. I like the idea of the branches, they're all coming through. Really good block out. Good use of block out as well. Yeah, I think this will turn out to be a great render. But yeah, good job, Drakenseal. Just generally. Right, Gamer Noob. And not a noob at 3D. Ah, he's even watermarked it. Right, so. Jesus. There's a lot of flowers. And a low poly rock right in the middle of it. Possibly the only blatant bit of low poly, so I don't think this is designed to be low poly. Like, this house is... wow, look at all these tiles. Really good. Yeah, possibly just have a look at that rock then, and its polygonal edges. I like the aspect of putting the branches on the edge of the or the leaves on the edge of the branches, because that's how they're going to be trying to get to the sunlight. Really good attention to detail. Jesus. There's a lot of like sparkling flecks as well. Oh, some good god rays. I think they're all stemming from one point. Are they? Yeah, I think there might be. Yeah, that seems like a bit of a compositing issue. I don't think the God rays would all be coming from that tiny, tiny point, because as the sun rays hit the Earth, they're going to be basically parallel. So you're going to want to try and make them look more like they're coming down equally from the same angle, because otherwise it's going to end up looking a bit crazy stylized, or like there's a tiny, tiny light source really close to the scene that's really, really bright. But yeah, there's barely any ground that isn't covered. It must have taken ages to render. It's a really good tree renders as well. The bark is moving along it really nicely. Doesn't seem to be many UV issues. There's a little bit there. I don't know if this is procedural, but it seems like it could be a little bit ironed out. But there's not a lot of problems with this, or it's just so dense that I can't really see anything. But yeah, the colour choices are great. I love the difference in greens as well. It's really highlighting the naturey feel of this. Yeah, some lovely dark greens, light greens, sort of yellows even. It's really good. I'd say the water is almost comically blue. Could possibly tone it down a bit, and then I think it would sort of fit in the scene a bit more, unless it's sort of magic. Which, if you're trying to get that across, then I think that's fine. But yeah, really good. Is there like the impression of another house here? Don't think so. No, I think it's just more forest. Yeah, it seems like a hill area. But yeah, really, really nice. I love all the plants and the foliage and the difference in flowers. White, yellow, red. All different kinds. Nice. Yeah, really good job. Not much, I don't think I've got anything else to say about it. It's possibly a little bit of an awkward white tree there, or a birch tree. Seems a bit strange, but otherwise, amazing work, Gamer Noob. Rolled potatoes. Alright, this seems to be a very abstract piece. Yeah, there seems to be some reflections madness going on here. I think that same glass video I talked about earlier, Blender Conference 2019, glass rendering tips, I think it's called. Yeah, just tiny, tiny like areas of black where I think the light bounces just went a bit weird, or you're just reflecting too much and it sort of caved in on itself. But otherwise, I think it's a really effective render. It sort of like transforms into barcodes at the top. There's a tiny little bit where that one's been chopped off, or it's not tall enough to go past the screen. I love the swirliness of the background. And the floating cubes. It's really nice, interesting composition as well. But yeah, I don't think there's anything technically wrong with this. This looks pretty great. I think it's been a bit of a nightmare on the rendering engine. Don't think there's any. Might be some cubes clipping with each other. I'll check that, unless that's intentional, in which case, go for it. I think if these were supposed to be sort of few and sort of closely grouped together, I don't know if it's supposed to be increasing in a gradient of low to high, but I think if you wanted to draw the eye across the image like that, then you could achieve that if you make this only a few blocks that are sort of not very densely populated, and then it goes on to be a lot more dense towards the right. But yeah, really good. Nice work. Rolled Potatoes. Good name as well. Yeah, I quite like this a lot. Right, moving on. Albin. Okay. I believe there were some other renders, but I think this was just this is the composited one as well. I think the other one was just raw render, but I'll just go with this one because it looks pretty great. I think the lighting is really good. Get sort of an air of mystery with these warning crates and this sort of like underground tree area, like graffiti. And a tree stump. It's an interesting place. I don't know what kind of situation would lead all these things to be in the same area. But I love the wall texture. I love the collection of rubble as well. Really good render. Depth of field on the camera as well is really selling that like low angle shot. I would say if you are one who's looking at making renders of, say, stuff like this where everything's parallel, then have a look at tilt shift lenses, because those are a setting you could really easily set, and they're really, really good for, say, architectural photography. And that sort of thing you can look at to maybe possibly improve this. Some interesting lights over here. I don't know if there's some sort of corridor on to the right, but it's a really good, interesting piece. Yeah, seems to be sort of a gouge out of the tree on here. Seems to be a bit polygonal. Possibly just up the detail a little bit, but otherwise it's pretty great. I think this tree doesn't suffer from that issue at all. Possibly having it look a bit more like it's grown into the ground instead of just stuck out of it. In this tree stump possibly as well. But really good work. And the leaves look good. Possibly need a bit more pass through on it, so like the light can be shined through the leaf a little bit, because I think that would happen more in a real leaf than it would here, just because the light's not penetrating it at all. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Very good job, Alden. Alright. Okay. Saber. Jesus. Yeah, I think there's just going to be nothing but praise from me, because there's basically nothing wrong with it. There's even all the logos on the wheels. Extremely high detail. Material in the carbon fibre, nice. It's even got the logo on it. Oh no, license plate, hee hee hee. Unless they're on the other bits of the car. Oh yeah, there was some topology renders. Okay, there might be license plate room on the back here. But I think in terms of topology, I've seen some movie grade quality topology on cars, and they're sometimes not as clean as this. I think it's extremely, extremely well made. There's not a single imperfection. I was just like rendering stuff with the wireframe, but there's like nothing wrong with it. I think there's just a tiny like line going up here, but I think that's just the lighting. Well, my general impression is it's just a real picture of a car. That's just what I see when I see this first. I'm not in any way able to say what is wrong with this or what could be done. I think this has just all been made perfectly. Yeah, look at this topology, it's just clean as fuck. It's just amazing. Even stuff like this, I think, is basically fine for a car model. If you're ever going to think about bowing it in the middle slightly, because then that might end up being a bit of an issue for you. But if this is just a static windshield, or if you're not ever going to do effects or rigging with it, because if you want to do some effects, then you're probably going to have some trouble with the distribution of detail on that. But otherwise, more or less faultless. That's a tiny bit weird. I can't see on the render. But no, I think you're good to go, basically. Go and get a job. I think if you were in a studio, they'd probably demand that this be attached to the car in some meaningful way, but it's all fine. You can handle it. Don't worry. You got this. You haven't got any other icon. I mean, I would. It's pretty great. Ah, yes, this is the video, which I left for last just so you could get your thing in, but I couldn't put the video into Krita, sorry. But yeah, Pokey Wizard. Springfield Elementary School, with some odd reflections going on. I think if this was supposed to be a proper tune, then it wouldn't have these sort of reflections on it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the logo reflections, but I think as a turnaround, it's really good. I think you've modelled it basically perfectly. I would say that the freestyle you've used to make it do the outlines is possibly fuzzing up a bit. They could probably have a look at, like, say, inverted hull, or just drawing on the black lines onto the texture. Because it's, and I'm not a big fan of freestyle, unless you are able to get it to behave very nicely, which some people are able to do, then I think it's harder to get it to work like this than just using other methods. But yeah, that takes a fair bit of work, but otherwise the rest of the model is just here, ready for that freestyle to behave nicely. Probably put linear interpolation on a turnaround render next time, just so it doesn't speed up, slow down awkwardly. But yeah, I'm just seeing the fuzziness on that freestyle. But yeah, otherwise a really good faithful recreation. I think it's really good. Keep up the good work, Pokey Wizard. Alright, that is the end, and please don't take this as criticism of your work. Just feel free to improve on whatever I've said. Feel free to ignore me as much as possible as well. I am but one person with imperfect opinions, but I try to be as objective as possible and trying to see your work for what it is rather than what, say, I would want it to be, which I don't think is ever the case. But yeah, good luck everyone and well done.